The massive courtroom buzzed with quiet conversations as beings from across the galaxy settled into their seats. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate 17 different atmospheric requirements, creating a strange mix of gases that made everyone feel slightly uncomfortable. Ambassador Thekra from the Centauri Federation adjusted her breathing apparatus and checked her translation device one final time. "This should be routine," whispered Delegate Morgan to his companion, a scaled reptilian from the outer systems, another species sharing their war experiences, probably complaining about human stubbornness or their primitive weapons. The massive doors at the front of the chamber hissed open with a sound that cut through all conversation. Every being in the room turned to watch as a tall, insectoid figure walked slowly toward the witness platform. His forearms hung loosely at his sides, and his compound eyes seemed to reflect every light in the room like broken mirrors. Commander Vexthul of the Zephyrian Imperial Guard had fought in over 40 conflicts across the galaxy. His military record showed victories against some of the most feared warrior species known to galactic civilization. The Bone Crushers of Rigel 7 had surrendered to his tactical brilliance. The hive mind of Sector 12 had requested mercy when faced with his strategic planning. His reputation was legendary, but today, as he approached the neural interface platform, his hands shook. The Tribunal Arbiter, a flowing jellyfish-like being named Kulan, extended her tentacles toward the interface controls. "Commander Vexthul, you are here to provide testimony regarding the recent Proxima conflict and humanity's integration into galactic warfare. Please state your experience with human military forces." Vexthul placed his 4 hands on the neural interface, and his breathing apparatus made a sound like wind through broken glass. The entire courtroom could hear it in the silence. "I commanded the 47th Shock Division during the Proxima conflict," he began, his voice carrying through the translation systems in 17 different languages. "We were told that humans were a newly spacefaring species. Our intelligence reports said they were primitive, limited in their capabilities, recently evolved from a single planet with no significant military achievements." He paused, and his mandibles clicked together in what observers recognized as a nervous habit among his species. "The High Command assigned my division to what they called a training exercise. We were told to expect minimal resistance from human forces. The objective was simple: capture 3 strategic outposts and demonstrate galactic military superiority to this new species." Several delegates in the audience exchanged knowing looks. They had all heard similar stories about newly contacted species needing to be shown their place in the galactic order. "When we first saw them through our reconnaissance equipment, my soldiers actually laughed," Vexthul continued, his voice growing quieter. "Humans are so small compared to most galactic species. No natural armor plating like the Thorians. No energy manipulation abilities like the Scions. No enhanced strength like the granite people of Kepler 9. The commander's compound eyes seemed to dim as he spoke. They looked fragile, soft. Their equipment appeared basic, almost primitive by our standards. My tactical officer, Subcommander Relnax, calculated that we could defeat their entire force in less than 6 standard rotations. The computer models agreed. Every simulation showed complete victory with minimal casualties on our side. Arbiter Kulan's tentacles moved in encouraging patterns. "Please continue with your account of the first engagement." Vexthul's breathing apparatus wheezed louder now, and he seemed to struggle with his next words. "The first battle was at Outpost Delta 7. Intelligence told us we would face approximately 200 human soldiers from something they called the Marine Corps. Our translation systems identified this as some sort of basic infantry unit. Nothing special. Nothing we had not defeated 100 times before." The massive alien warrior paused again, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "We had fought the berserker clans of Vega. We had broken the iron legions of the Magellanic Empire. We had defeated species that had been perfecting warfare for thousands of years. But when we engaged these humans..." His voice trailed off completely. The silence in the courtroom stretched for long moments. Even the air recyclers seemed to quiet down, as if the building itself was listening. "Commander?" Arbiter Kulan prompted. gently. Vexthul looked up at the assembled delegates, his compound eyes reflecting the lights like a broken kaleidoscope. When we engaged these humans, we discovered that everything we thought we knew about warfare was wrong. Everything we believed about civilization and military doctrine and the limits of biological endurance was completely, catastrophically wrong. Leaned forward on the platform, his forearms gripping the neural interface so tightly that the metal began to bend. "My soldiers do not laugh anymore," he said quietly. "None of them laugh anymore. And after you hear what I have to tell you about humanity, none of you will laugh either." The courtroom remained completely silent, waiting for him to continue. Vexthul's breathing grew heavier as he prepared to continue his testimony. The neural interface hummed softly, translating his words into 17 different languages for the assembled delegates. His forearms trembled slightly as he activated the holographic display system. A three-dimensional image appeared above the courtroom, showing a rocky outpost built into the side of a mountain. The structure looked basic, almost primitive, with simple concrete walls and basic defensive positions. Red markers indicated Zephyrian attack positions surrounding the human base. The siege began on Standard Day 127 of the Proxima campaign, Vexthul said, his voice carrying a strange mixture of respect and horror. "Our initial assault should have taken the outpost within hours. We had superior numbers, better weapons, and complete tactical advantage." He gestured toward the hologram with one of his forearms, highlighting specific positions around the base. That humans were led by someone they called Sergeant Kim Dae-ho. Our intelligence had identified him as a mid-level commander with basic training. Nothing in his file suggested exceptional ability. He was just another human soldier. The hologram shifted to show communication intercepts and battle recordings. Strange human voices speaking in their odd musical language filled the courtroom through the translation systems. On the 12th day of the siege, our artillery scored a direct hit on the human command post. We monitored their emergency communications and learned that Sergeant Kim had been severely wounded. Shrapnel had torn through his torso. By all medical standards of every species we know, he should have been evacuated immediately or died from his injuries. Vexthul paused, his mandibles clicking together rapidly. Several delegates leaned forward in their seats. Instead, he continued commanding from a makeshift stretcher. For 61 more days. 61 days of constant combat while bleeding, from wounds that would have killed most species within hours. A ripple of disbelief moved through the courtroom. Even the most hardy warrior species in the galaxy could not function effectively while seriously wounded for more than a few days. "We intercepted their medical reports," Vexthul continued, his voice growing quieter. "The human medics kept requesting permission to evacuate their sergeant. He kept refusing. He said his soldiers needed him more than he needed medical treatment." The holographic display showed recorded conversations between human soldiers. Their voices sounded tired but determined, speaking words that the translation system struggled to interpret properly. On day 15, we successfully cut all their supply lines. No food shipments, no ammunition deliveries, no medical supplies. My tactical computers calculated they would surrender within 36 hours. Every military doctrine we knew said that isolated forces without supplies could not maintain combat effectiveness. Vexthul's compound eyes seemed to lose focus as he remembered. The humans began rationing their emergency food supplies, small compressed bars that barely qualified as nutrition. When our scouts analyzed what they were eating, our xenobiologist said the caloric content was insufficient to sustain combat operations for more than a few days. He activated another section of the hologram, showing human soldiers moving between defensive positions. They looked thin, exhausted, but still maintained their weapons and equipment with careful precision. After their emergency rations ran out, they began eating things our science teams could not identify. Plant matter from the local ecosystem that had never been tested for human consumption. Insects. Parts of damaged equipment that somehow provided nutrients. The alien commander's breathing apparatus made a sound like wind through leaves. On day 40, during one of our probing attacks, we managed to capture one of their wounded soldiers, a female they called Park So-min. She had been fighting for 26 days with a fractured leg bone. 26 days. Our medical scans showed the bone had never been properly set. She had been walking and fighting on a broken leg for nearly a month. Several delegates made sounds of amazement in their various languages. Such endurance was beyond the understanding of most galactic species. During interrogation, we asked her about their breaking point. When would they surrender? When would their morale finally collapse? She looked at us with those strange human eyes and smiled. Actually smiled. Then she said something our translators took several hours to process properly. Vexthal leaned forward on the platform, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. She said, "We are just getting started." The courtroom fell completely silent. Not even the air recycling systems made noise. "Just getting started," Vexthal repeated. "After 40 days of siege, with no supplies, with wounded leadership, eating, things that should have been poisonous fighting on broken bones, they were just getting started." He deactivated the holographic display, and the images of the human outpost faded away. That was when I began to understand that we were not fighting soldiers in the traditional sense. We were not even fighting a military force as we understood the concept. We were fighting something that treated survival as a basic skill, endurance, as a normal expectation, and impossible odds as just another day. His forearms gestured helplessly. The siege lasted 73 days total. 73 days against an enemy that should have surrendered in less than 2. And when it finally ended, it was not because the humans could not continue fighting. Vexthal looked directly at the assembled delegates. It ended because we ran out of supplies first. The holographic display flickered back to life as Vexthal prepared to continue his testimony. This time, the image showed a different battlefield, a series of rocky hills dotted with mining equipment and defensive positions. The alien commander's forearms moved nervously as he adjusted the display controls. The worst part was not there. "Endurance," Vexthal said, his voice carrying a new tone of fear that had not been present before. "The worst part was watching them learn, watching them change, watching them become something new right in front of our eyes." He highlighted a section of the holographic battlefield, showing scattered mining facilities across several hilltops. This was the Battle of Kepler Ridge. We had been fighting the humans for 6 weeks at this point, and my commanders decided to deploy our sonic disruptors. These weapons emit sound frequencies that cause panic and confusion in most species. We had used them successfully against 12 different civilizations. The weapons target the inner ear and brain functions, causing complete breakdown of military discipline. The display showed strange tower-like devices positioned around the human positions. Energy readings indicated they were producing powerful sonic waves. Within the first hour of activation, the human forces were clearly affected. We could see them stumbling, covering their ears, showing obvious signs of distress. My tactical team calculated that they would retreat or surrender within 6 hours maximum. Vexthal paused, his mandibles clicking together rapidly. Instead, something impossible happened. After exactly 5 hours and 47 minutes, our sonic disruptors began malfunctioning. Not mechanical failure. Someone was interfering with their frequencies. The holographic display shifted to show communication intercepts and technical readouts. Strange human voices could be heard speaking quickly in their complex language, mixing technical terms with what sounded like excitement. We discovered that a human engineer named Lee Tae-min had somehow analyzed our sonic patterns and figured out how to generate counter-frequencies. He had taken apart their communication equipment, their radio systems, even parts of their damaged vehicles, and built devices that could neutralize our weapons. Several delegates in the courtroom made sounds of disbelief. Counter-engineering. Enemy technology during active combat was considered nearly impossible. This happened in 6 hours, Vexthal emphasized. 6 hours to understand completely alien technology, reverse engineer it, and create effective countermeasures, using spare parts, while under enemy fire, while being affected by the sonic attacks themselves. The alien commander activated another section of the display, showing recorded conversations between human soldiers. But that was not the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was what happened next. The humans began to study us. Not our technology. Us. Our behavior. Our psychology, our social structures. The holographic display now showed a human soldier crouched behind cover, speaking into a communication device. The recording had been enhanced to show his facial expressions and body language. This was Corporal Choi Minho. Before the war, he had been some kind of teacher on their home planet. Nothing in his background suggested military intelligence training or psychological warfare expertise. Vex Thul's breathing apparatus made a sound like grinding metal. Within 3 days of studying our communication patterns, he learned to mimic our distress calls perfectly. Not just the sounds, he understood the emotional content, the social meanings, the cultural significance of different signals. The display showed a tactical map with red markers indicating Zephyrian positions and blue markers showing human forces. Several red markers had X symbols over them. He would broadcast fake emergency signals using our own communication frequencies. When our rescue teams responded to help what they thought were wounded comrades, they found human ambush positions waiting for them. The courtroom stirred with murmurs of amazement and concern. Such psychological manipulation required deep understanding of alien culture and mentality. Ambush after ambush. He learned which frequencies indicated different ranks, which signals suggested specific types of injuries, which calls would trigger the strongest rescue responses from our soldiers. Vex Thul's compound eyes seemed to dim as he continued. We tried changing our communication protocols. He adapted within hours. We used encrypted channels. He found ways to break them. We switched to nonverbal signals. He learned to interpret our body language and tactical movements. The alien commander gestured helplessly with all 4 arms. In 2 weeks, this human teacher understood Zephyrian military psychology better than some of our own strategists who had studied it for decades. And a Arcturian delegate raised a tentacle to ask a question. Surely this was exceptional intelligence gathering from human command. Vex Thul's response was immediate and emphatic. No, we monitored all their communications. These adaptations were not coming from their leadership. Individual human soldiers were learning, improvising, and innovating in real time during active combat. He activated another holographic sequence showing various battlefield modifications. They turned mining equipment into guided missile systems. They converted medical scanners into long-range communication arrays. They used their own damaged spacecraft as kinetic weapons by calculating precise orbital trajectories. The display showed human soldiers working with tools and equipment, modifying everything around them with quick, efficient movements. Every piece of technology, every environmental feature, every abandoned piece of equipment became a potential weapon in human hands. They looked at mining drills and saw artillery. They looked at cargo containers and saw mobile bunkers. They looked at water recycling systems and saw chemical weapon delivery methods. Vex Thul's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We realized we were not fighting an army with fixed capabilities. We were fighting a species that could turn anything around them into instruments of war. A species that learned faster than we could adapt our tactics. He looked directly at the assembled delegates. We were fighting evolution in real time. The courtroom had grown so quiet that even the smallest sounds seemed amplified. Vex Thul's breathing apparatus wheezed steadily as he prepared to continue his testimony. His 4 arms gripped the neural interface platform so tightly that small stress cracks appeared in the metal. There is something that humans do, he began, his voice barely audible through the translation systems. Something that changed everything we thought we understood about warfare and civilization. The holographic display activated, showing a massive asteroid floating in space. The rocky surface was dotted with mining facilities, communication towers, and defensive installations. It looked like a typical industrial outpost carved directly into the stone. This was mining station Kappa 7. We had successfully captured it during our 3rd week of operations. The facility was strategically important because it controlled shipping routes through the entire sector. Vex Thul highlighted various sections of the asteroid base with his pointing device. Red markers showed Zephyrian positions, while blue dots indicated where human prisoners were being held. We had taken 37 human prisoners during the assault. Most were wounded, but they were still alive. According to galactic warfare conventions, prisoners must be treated with basic dignity and provided medical care. The alien commander's mandibles began clicking together rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among his species. Among the prisoners, was their medical officer, a female named Yoon Seo-ra. Even after capture, she continued trying to treat wounded soldiers from both sides. Both sides. She would bandage Zephyrian injuries with the same care she showed to human wounds. Several delegates in the courtroom made approving sounds. Medical neutrality was respected across most galactic civilizations. My soldiers began to respect her dedication. She worked 18-hour shifts treating everyone who needed help. She shared her medical supplies with our wounded. She even learned basic Zephyrian anatomy to provide better care for my troops. The holographic display showed recordings of the human medic, moving between different areas of the captured base, carrying medical equipment, and treating various species of wounded soldiers. My Lieutenant Subcommander Krelnoth decided this was a sign of weakness. He believed that showing mercy to prisoners would make the remaining human forces think we were soft. He wanted to send a message about Zephyrian military strength. Vexthal's voice became strained as if speaking. The next words caused him physical pain. He executed her, in front of the other prisoners, to demonstrate our resolve and break their morale. The courtroom stirred uncomfortably. Several delegates exchanged worried glances. What happened next? Vexathul struggled to find words. I have fought in 43 major conflicts across the galaxy. I have seen species fight with desperate courage when facing extinction. I have witnessed the most savage combat in known space. But what happened next was unlike anything in my experience. The holographic display shifted to show the interior of the prison facility. Human soldiers could be seen behind energy barriers, their faces showing the normal expressions of captured military personnel. Tired, worried, but maintaining basics, discipline. The change was instantaneous. One moment, the remaining prisoners were behaving like defeated soldiers following standard protocols. The next moment, they became something else entirely. Vexthal's compound eyes reflected the courtroom, lights like broken mirrors. Their leader, Staff Sergeant Jang Hyun-woo, made a sound I had never heard before. Not a scream or a shout, but something that seemed to come from deep inside his chest. A roar that sounded like breaking stone and crashing metal. The alien. Commander activated an audio recording. The sound that filled the courtroom was unlike anything most delegates had ever experienced. It was raw, primal, and filled with such fury that several beings instinctively moved away from the speakers. Then he charged. Not tactically, not following any military doctrine I recognized. He just charged directly at the energy barrier that was holding him prisoner. The holographic display showed the human soldier running straight into a barrier that should have knocked him unconscious. Instead, he seemed to absorb the electrical shock and keep moving. The barrier was designed to stop creatures twice his size and strength. He hit it 17 times. 17 times. Each impact should have rendered him unconscious, but he kept getting up and charging again. Vexthal's breathing grew more labored. On the 18th attempt, the barrier generator overloaded from the constant impacts. The moment it failed, he was through. But he was not alone anymore. All the human prisoners had the same expression on their faces, the same terrifying focus. The display showed multiple human soldiers moving with frightening coordination, but without any apparent communication between them. They had no weapons. We had removed everything that could be used for combat, so they used pieces of the facility itself. Broken metal, chunks of rock, damaged equipment. They fought with their bare hands when nothing else was available. The alien commander's voice dropped to a whisper. We had superior numbers in that section of the base. We had energy weapons, body armor, tactical advantages. My soldiers were trained, experienced, well-equipped. But the humans... He paused. The humans were not fighting like soldiers anymore. They were fighting like forces of nature, like hurricanes or earthquakes that had somehow taken human form. Vexthal looked directly at the assembled delegates. Staff Sergeant Jang was shot 17 times during the fighting, 17 times with weapons that should have killed him after the third shot. But he kept coming. They all kept coming. Not because they thought they could win, but because something inside them had decided that retreat was impossible. His voice became barely audible. We retreated from our own captured position. Elite Zephyrian shock troops, running from wounded prisoners who should have been dead 3 times over. Vexthul stood motionless at the witness platform for several long minutes, his breathing apparatus the only sound echoing through the massive courtroom. His forearms hung at his sides and his compound eyes stared at something beyond the assembled delegates, as if seeing memories that refused to fade. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on every being in the chamber. The armistice came 3 days after the prison break. He began slowly, each word carefully chosen. Both sides had taken heavy casualties, and our high command decided that diplomatic solutions might be more effective than continued military action. The holographic display activated one final time, showing a series of meeting rooms and conference facilities on a neutral space station. Human and Zephyrian officers could be seen sitting across from each other at polished tables. I was assigned as a military liaison during the peace negotiations. My superiors thought that my direct combat experience with human forces would be valuable for understanding their negotiating positions and military capabilities. Vexthul adjusted his position on the platform, his mandibles clicking together, nervously. I believed this assignment would finally give me answers. After months of fighting an enemy that defied every tactical principle I had ever learned, I thought I might discover the secret of their military effectiveness. Perhaps they had hidden weapon systems or advanced training methods or some kind of genetic enhancement that our intelligence had missed. The alien commander activated a section of the holographic display showing recorded conversations between human military officers. Their voices filled the courtroom through the translation systems, speaking in their complex, musical language. On the second day of negotiations, I was monitoring human communication channels as part of my liaison duties. I discovered that the human commander, Colonel Nam Ji-hoon, was conducting what they called an after-action review with his senior staff. The display showed several human officers sitting around a conference table, reviewing battlefield footage and tactical data. They appeared relaxed, professional, discussing their recent combat experiences with the same tone other species might use to talk about routine training exercises. They were analyzing specific engagements from our conflict, discussing different approaches they could have taken, different methods they could have employed. At first, this seemed like normal military procedure. Vexthul's breathing grew heavier as he continued, but then they began talking about tactics and strategies that made my translation systems malfunction. Methods of warfare so brutal and devastating that my linguistic processors could not find equivalent concepts in any known galactic language. Several delegates leaned forward in their seats, intrigued and concerned by this revelation. They discussed something they called total war. They talked about targeting civilian infrastructure, disrupting food supplies, psychological operations designed to break enemy morale completely. They analyzed weapon systems that could sterilize entire planets, strategies that could collapse interstellar governments. The courtroom stirred with murmurs of shock and disbelief. Such warfare concepts were beyond the understanding of most civilized galactic species. But here is what shattered my comprehension of reality, Vexthul said, his voice growing stronger with the importance of what he was about to reveal. After discussing these methods in detail, after analyzing their effectiveness and refining their implementation, they dismissed them. All of them. Every single devastating strategy was rejected. His compound eyes focused directly on the assembled delegates. They rejected them because the tactics violated what humans call rules of engagement and laws of war, and Geneva Conventions. These are limitations that humans place on themselves during combat. Restrictions they follow voluntarily, even when facing extinction. The alien commander gestured with all four arms toward the holographic display. I realized that everything I had witnessed during our conflict, the impossible endurance, the terrifying adaptability, the berserker transformations, all of it represented humans fighting with restraints. They had been holding back, limiting themselves, following rules that prevented them from using their full capabilities. Vexthul's voice cracked with the strain of comprehension. During our final diplomatic meeting, I asked Colonel Nam directly why humans maintained such restrictions during warfare. Why limit themselves when facing enemies who showed no such restraint? Why follow rules that made victory more difficult? The YAS holographic display showed the human colonel, a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes, sitting across from the alien commander. His expression was serious, but not hostile. He looked at me with those strange human eyes and said something that I will remember for the rest of my existence. He said, because the moment we stop following our rules, we stop being the people worth defending. The courtroom fell into complete silence. Even the automated systems seemed to pause. Worth defending, Vexthel repeated quietly. Not worth fighting for or worth dying for, but worth defending. He meant that humans wage war not just to protect their territory or resources or political systems, but to protect their identity as a species that chooses mercy over vengeance. His breathing apparatus wheezed loudly in the silence. We did not lose to humanity's superior technology. We did not lose to their tactical brilliance or their strategic planning or their numerical advantages. We lost because they chose to show us mercy when they could have chosen annihilation. Vexthel looked around the courtroom, meeting the eyes of delegates from 17 different worlds. And the most terrifying revelation of all is that throughout our entire conflict, we never saw what humans are truly capable of when they stop holding back. We never faced their real military potential. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Pray to whatever deities you worship that you never have to.